everybody. I thought we'd talk about weave pole independence this week. Someone asked that question on the Facebook group, and I think it's a good time to talk about it. I think it's really worth training your weave poles so that your dog will stay in the poles no matter what you do. It does sometimes take a little bit of practice for some dogs, depending on how much obstacle focus they have, and depending on what you did in your foundation training. I think that what we do in our foundation weave pole training lends itself a lot to creating that independence early on. The type of weave pole foundation training I do is the 2x2 method, which originated with Susan Garrett. You may be familiar with her. I also may do a little bit of guide wire training in there too, depending on what the dogs need. But I find that the 2x2 method gives us an opportunity to teach the dogs several really important skills early on, which makes it easier to teach independence on 12 poles later on. So that comes much more simply when your dogs have certain skills on a set of 2 poles or a set of 4 poles. So if you haven't taught yet any weave pole training at all, and you're coming to this video, then I will direct you to the correct video to get you started on your weave pole training from the beginning. But if you've done some weave pole training and you are looking to strengthen your dog's skills, then we're going to dial it back a little bit and go back to a set of 4 poles so that we can really give your dog a chance to get rewarded early for holding some independence in the poles. And before we get into more about that, I think that there's some important things to think about when you're training your poles. I think we want enthusiastic and fast weave pole training, weave pole performances, in addition to independent ones. So not just that you can send your dog to the poles and leave them in there and go to the next spot on the course, have motion against them or anything like that. That's all really important, but also that they are enthusiastic about the poles and that they do it quickly. So we want them to love doing it because that's the fastest way to get and the easiest way to get a fast performance and an enthusiastic performance. So the first thing that you have to check off on your checklist is, are your training sessions fun? Weave pole training sessions that are short and fun, where we really keep the enthusiasm high, will lend themselves to faster performances later. Whenever you're training anything, it's important to remember that you're not only teaching your dog what to do, what is the behavior that we're teaching, but also that you're teaching them how to feel about doing it. So if you teach really exciting, fun weave pole performances, you'll have exactly that. So even if you're only teaching your first set of 2x2s or you're working on 4 poles or 6, whatever you're doing, if you keep it high and exciting, you're enthusiastic, you're happy with the dog, even if they make a mistake, we don't make a big deal about it, then you will have much more success in getting those enthusiastic, fast weave pole performances. So however the feeling is in the training session is how your dog will feel about the performance. So keep it happy, keep it fun. And we also want to be clear about what our criteria are and clear about when and where and why we're going to reward. And those are things that we'll talk about as you watch the demonstration. But generally, a weave pole performance, if you think about it, it's actually a duration behavior. So they have to stay in the poles for a certain amount of time. It's 12 poles, so however long that takes. And then they have to do it no matter what we're doing. So it's a lot like if you think about similar criteria in training a stay. It's also a duration behavior. So we have to help them understand to hold their performance and then to do that no matter what we're doing. Now, if you train a stay and you're adding distance, the first time you add distance is not the first time that you're also doing a 30-second stay. So if we're trying to teach 12 poles and independence, that's too many criteria. But if you want to work on independence, you can do it on 4 poles, which allows you to reward early and often, and then later add back in the duration or the number of poles if you want to think about it that way. So that's also important, which is why I recommend going to 4 poles and then teaching your dog to weave those 4 poles no matter what you do, and then 6 poles, and then you can then do maybe 6 and 6 come a lot easier after your dog gets it on just the 6 poles. So those are some things also that are important. Now, where do we reward? I think it's really smart on your weave poles to reward on the exit of the poles. So that comes from knowing which direction your dog will be exiting, depending on which side you're standing on. But generally, around the end of the poles is going to be really good. So a reward that you can throw is ideal because then it's not always there as a target. So you may be asking, can I use my treat and train? Yes, you can. You can use it early, but then I would look for something, or you can use a bowl also. But I would look for something later that you can throw that your dog can easily see. So certain types, if you're using food, then certain types of toys where you can put the food in the toy and then throw it there. you can get it, okay. That's really helpful. If you are using a bowl, then get somebody to pick it up for you, get a helper, so that you can, if you need to, prevent your dog from getting the reward. That's how we do it. So we never want to forbid the dog from going to the reward. We always want them to think that they should run enthusiastically to their reward. So if you need a helper to pick up the reward, then that's something you want to have with you as well. And so those are things that are important. And then the timing of the reward, it really should be as soon as they are in the last set of poles, you can throw the reward then so that they get it quite immediately. So if they come out of the poles and they turn towards you, that can be a little bit late. We have really 1 second or less to reward a dog and have them connect the action with the reward. So the more timely you are, the better, okay? And then the other question is, we got where we're putting the reward, when. Now there's the why part. Why are we rewarding? So you have to think about what are your criteria, and those are the things that you'll see as we go through the exercise. Is that if we're working on independent performances, first we might be working on just parallel distance. So we would reward the dog for performing 4 poles consistently while you are 1 foot parallel, 2 feet parallel, etc. So we want to understand what our criteria are for each little training session and make sure we're rewarding clearly, because then it's easier for the dog to understand what they're being rewarded for. And the more clear we are, the faster they learn and the quicker it is to a fast, independent, enthusiastic weave pole performance. Ready? There are 3 main components when you're thinking about training weave poles. One of them is the entrance that your dog makes. So an independent weave pole performance would mean that your dog can enter the weave poles with the correct entrance, left shoulder next to the first pole. No matter where you are, no matter where they're coming from, they can easily do it. Or they can do it with a little bit of help from handling. But that's one of the things that I think is important about weave pole training, is that your dog is able to make entries fairly independently. So there's the entry, there's also staying in the poles, and that's why we talked about keeping the poles to 4 poles when we're first working on this. And then there's also the exit, and them knowing how to exit, and that's probably the easiest part, but them being able to exit on their own and then go on to the next obstacle. So first we're gonna work on teaching your dog to stay in the poles without you necessarily needing to be right next to them for the whole weave pole duration. So there's gonna be 2 exercises that I'm gonna give you to work on this with your dog, and you'll need, like I said before, you will need a reward of some kind, and your dog has a set of 4 poles. Touch, sit, stay. If you don't have 4 weave poles, you can get 4 garden stakes and just get white PVC and put them over each stake and stick it in the ground, and that will work just fine. So just in that case, make sure they're 2 feet apart and you'll be good to go. So we're gonna start with straight on entrances. And we'll start with dog on left, because that is the easier side for most dogs, because they're already on the correct lead going in there, so that makes it easier for them. Whereas on the opposite side, they have to make a lead change away from you. And you're gonna position your dog on an easy entry, stay next to them, and then when they're in the poles, you're gonna move diagonally away. Ready? Weave. And we will. Okay, so we're just gradually adding a little bit of distance there, and how much distance you add is dependent on your individual dog. If this is the first time you've done it ever, then you're gonna keep your diagonal line away from the poles pretty soft. If you have done it before, or if your dog is pretty tolerant of it, you can be a little bit more steep in your diagonal line away from the poles. Here it is from another angle, and you can see my dog is already looking at the poles, ready to go. Okay, weave, weave, yay, good boy. Now we want to, like I said, keep it happy. So I'm going to praise him pretty loudly and throw the toy as soon as he's exiting, so it's nice and timely. Now we'll do it from the other side. So always important to train your weave poles from both sides. Don't get stuck just handling the one side always, because that will be harder for your dog in the long run. So teach it from both directions from the get-go. Sit, stay. Still gonna start close and move diagonally away. Okay, weave, 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 yay, good boy. And you can see that's pretty easy for him. It wasn't easy for him when we first trained it. When I first trained it, he would pop out quite a bit, but with some practice, he's able to stay in there for the length of 12 poles, and this is how I started it. So that's one exercise that you can do. Okay, weave, weave, yay, good boy. And you can see I'm kind of running out of space on that side, but that's okay. In many different practices in different places, which is also important with your weave pole training, that not just practicing it always in the same place, but taking your poles and going on field trips, you will find plenty of room to work, and you'll be able to add that distance, sit, and that's a really great way to proof your poles also. Okay, weave, weave, yay, good boy. Very good. So that's going well. Then the other thing that we can do, similar along those lines, which will get your dog also beginning to work on entries, is you start a little further away and just move parallel with them. Okay, weave, weave, good boy. All right, so instead of being 1 foot away from the poles or whatever you're used to, you're 2 feet away, 3 feet away, moving parallel so that they get used to making the entry right in front of them, but with you not necessarily right up next to the poles as well. Maybe I'll be a couple feet off the poles. Okay, weave, weave, good. Going straight. And then I can keep adding more and more distance that way, laterally away from the poles. So those are 2 really good exercises to help begin to add some independence to the poles. And it's really important that the reward always comes at the end of the obstacle, so that the dog begins to focus on the obstacle, not you. If the reward is always on you, then if you were to say, send your dog to the poles and run in the other direction, that's part of why they pull out, because they see their reward leaving and they want to go with it. But if they understand that by completing the obstacle, the reward will come at the end of the obstacle, then they begin to have value in the obstacle itself, and it helps them understand that they should complete the whole thing. So, reward after the obstacle on the line that they are taking, and you'll have a really good start in independent weave poles. So that's the first couple of exercises that you can work on. There will be more coming as we go along, because certainly we have to look at adding jumps, we have to look at entrances, we have to build the duration, but this will get us started. So have fun practicing that. Make sure your dog is also having fun, and I'll look forward to seeing your videos and answering your questions.